Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tado jayarayat ashtapriyashu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamashuki bhaktir bhavati naistaki nigama kalpadura karitam padam shukama rita dravisamritam pibata bhagatam rashamariyam mahora hora sika bhuvi bhavakaham Krishna sadam bhavagate dharmagini hishaha karunashta dvishamesha paranako dunoditaham Tvamapiyadabhishuta vishutam vibhu samapiyadanabiram virishanam prakyahiduho mahoraditantanam sankleshan nirvanamusandi nanyataham Om aganatimarandasya ganangana sadakya chaksurun meditam yena tajmai sri gurave namaha Sri Chaitanya manobhistam stapitam yena bhutare Sayam rupakaramayam darati swaparantikam Vandeham Sri-Guru Siyata Parakamalam Shri-Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Sri-Rupam Sagatatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sidevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri-Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishikhan Vitam Scha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachadine Nirvishesa Sannivadi Praskita Desatadine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Let's back up and say the Chaitanya mantra once again, because we're very close now in the countdown. Just a few more days until Sunday, March 28th, when we celebrate Gaur Purnima, the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindam Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaur Tve Namaha Vairaga Vija Nija Bhakti Non Shikarta Meka Parushaparanam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Saraya Kripambari Hashtam Dahambare Krishna Vaniti Sa Krishnam Sangam Pangara Yagya Sankatanamari Yajanti Pishu Meridham Harinama Harinama Harinami Vakevanam Karona Stevana Stevana Steva Gatiranyataha Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Lakshmi is with us right from the starting gate today. Haribo, good morning, Lakshmi.
Good morning, Prabhu. Haribo. Glories to Prabhupada.
Haribo. Happy, 4 days before Gaur Purnima?
Yes. Relish every moment.
Yeah. We're joined by Rakesh from Salt Lake City, as well as Raleigh from Spanish Fork, Jean from Salt Lake City, Sue, who's a citizen of the world. She travels constantly. We see her coming through Spanish Fork periodically, have lunch, and she's always driving a different vehicle. She's tuning in this morning from South Carolina. Good morning, Sue. And good morning, everybody. It's one of my favorite verses from the Bhagavatam. I think I memorized this verse like 40 years ago because it was just so nectarine. It's the 8th verse in the 5th chapter, 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. These are the words of Narada Muni. Just like Paul wrote most of the New Testament, I think an argument could be made that Narada Muni wrote most of the Bhakti scriptures that we quote from, and all the really pithy, not all, but of course many of the really pithy quotes come from Narada Muni. It's not surprising because he's none other than the Guru, the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, who compiled all the Vedic literatures as well as the Mahabharata and the Srimad Bhagavatam, the spotless commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, the ripened fruit of the Vedas. So in one sense you might consider that not only the direct quotes of Narada Muni, but also indirectly Narada Muni is our main inspiration, the fountainhead for devotional service to Lord Sri Krishna. And he says, Sri Narada Uvacha Bhavata Nodito Prayam Yasho Bhagavatam Alam Yenaivashu Natushyata Manyet Prad Darshanam Kiram. To his disciple, Vyasadeva, you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless. We read the purport the last 2 days, but I just want to reread this one short paragraph from the purport, which will get us launched on Wisdom Wednesday today. The compiler of the Vedanta Darshan is Vyasadeva himself, yet he is troubled. I love that way Prabhupada says, he is troubled, although he is the author. So what sort of transcendental bliss, and this is the question, if the author is troubled, then of course the next question arises, what kind of bliss can be derived by the readers and listeners of Vedanta, which is not directly explained by Vyasadeva. So if the author is troubled, feeling unfulfilled, well, certainly the readers are going to feel unfulfilled as well. So herein lies the necessity of explaining Vedanta Sutra in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam by the self-same author. Just to backtrack a little bit, Vedanta Sutra is philosophical aphorisms, atato brahma jignasha, little condensed statements that you kind of have to unpack and have a philosophical brain and a complete conversancy with the Vedas in order to determine, mine, you might say, the meanings of these short aphorisms which you find in the Vedanta Sutra. And that's pretty much beyond the reach of those of us who are living in the Kali Yuga. We just don't have the capacity to pull out from Vedanta Sutra the meaning of bhakti or devotional service. And so then Sri Sudra Dvija Bandhu, the Mahabharata was written for those who couldn't understand the Vedanta Sutras. It's full of stories and conspiracies, kings, queens, love affairs, betrayals. It's very riveting. And so that's called the fifth Veda for the average person who lives in the Kali Yuga. But then the Mahabharata also is permeated with material considerations, dharma, artha, karma, moksha, economic development, sense gratification, liberation, and religiosity. And so after having done all of that, and all of it, Vyasadeva didn't have to do any of it, did he? I mean, what does he get out of it? He's already a Shaktavish avatar. He's already an incarnation avatar, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's self-realized. He's Mahamanita Magnachitam. He's swimming in an ocean of bliss. Why do any of the personalities from the Mahabharata and the Bhagavatam do whatever they do? It's just out of a sense of kindness and compassion for those of us who are wallowing in the material sense gratification and revolving in the endless cycle of birth, death, disease, and old age. It pains great souls without any exception. The definition of a great soul is someone who is pained by others who are not fulfilling their destiny, or tragically wasting the valuable opportunity of the human form of life. I'm learning a verse right now. I may be a little hesitant in it, but it's from the fourth canto, Yad Brajamanam Sharuchaiva Shashvato Trilokaya Pribhajanti Tesham Nan Rajam Jantushu Teanugraha Brajanti Charanti Bhajanti Checharam. Says the Vaikuntha planets, which are so bright and so effulgent. There's no birth, no disease, no old age, no unhappiness, no thirst, no hunger, no unfulfillment. Everybody rises to the fullness of their capacity. Everyone's completely satisfied in the most profound way possible. They're all 100% Krishna consciousness. Those planets cannot be reached, and this is my point here, by someone who is not full-time engaged in welfare work for all living beings. The kingdom of God is declared to be unattainable, unreachable by those who are not full-time engaged in the welfare of all living beings. So the brutal truth of that is it doesn't matter how many times you go to church or give or how many quotes from the scripture you know, if you're putting the flesh of animals in your mouth that were slaughtered on your account to satisfy your tongue or your appetite, you can scream and shout, I'm saved, Lord, hallelujah, amen, I'm saved. I'm here to put you on notice. You may be saved, except for the fact that instead of being engaged full-time in the welfare of all living beings, you're engaged in oppressing, terrifying, imprisoning, incarcerating other living beings who are basically your brothers and your sisters. Prahlad Maharaj says, Yat mrigashta karamarkaku sadishub kagama atmana pavash karishamataram kara. Prahlad Maharaj says, unnecessarily, sometimes it might be necessary, but only as a last resort, unnecessarily, one should not even kill insects. One should never step on an ant or a cockroach unless it is absolutely necessary. Why? Atmavat putravat prashed. Because these are putra, these are sons of the Almighty Lord. And we are also sons, so these are our brothers and sisters. What to speak of wishing well to the souls and the bodies of animals? One should be engaged in welfare work for all living beings, especially those who have the human form of life, who have this unique and rare and valuable opportunity. Jala, jala, nabalakadi, primayodak, pakshinam dasadakaram, chatur lakani manisham, all the 8,400,000 species of life. Only a relatively small fraction have attained the human form of life. And out of those who have attained the human form of life, as Lord Chaitanya teaches Rupa Goswami, very, very few are religious. And out of those who are religious, only 1 in thousands may actually follow the Vedas. And out of thousands that follow the Vedas, only 1 may be interested in liberation. And out of thousands who are interested in liberation, only 1 may come to the personalistic conception. And out of thousands who come to the personalistic conception, only 1 will be interested in serving in devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Manusharam sahasrishu kashti yatataram siddhanam kashti mambire vadvraham. So every liberated soul, or every soul on the path of liberation, works tirelessly and selflessly to try to make others among the lucky 1/1000th of 1/1000th of 1/1000th of 1% of the spirit souls who solve the problems of life, birth, death, disease, and old age, and go back to home, back to God. What do you think, Lakshmi?
Yeah, I think that it becomes actually a compulsion in one respect, because what happens is the Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the Tattvam Sutram mentions that these qualities, particularly compassion, friendliness, respect, etc., these are intrinsic to the soul. So when one is in a process of soul or self-realization, and they are actually executing the process in the proper manner, then what naturally begins to occur are things like compassion. So I think it's the litmus test for someone that's advancing or getting closer to God, when they are able to understand or feel compassion, even for the suffering animal, what to speak of the human being. Because I've never seen anyone witness a slaughterhouse situation and like really be joyous about it. They're just like,
it's illegal. You can't even visit the slaughterhouses anymore. And if you take pictures some or other surreptitiously, you can go to jail. Because of that very reason. You cannot witness it and remain unmoved.
Right. I mean, because natural to the soul is compassion. And what does compassion means? You cannot tolerate the suffering of others. Now, it's just a matter of being consciously compassion or unconsciously compassion. In other words, it is part of you, but you ignore it. That's what the mode of ignorance, tamagun, means, to ignore. So, when people are living a lifestyle, cultivating a lifestyle that's primarily rajasic, which makes them too busy to see, and tamasic, which makes them too ignorant to see, then, it doesn't eliminate the fact that they're compassionate by nature. And proof of it is put them in a slaughterhouse, which they won't even allow anymore. Put them in look at the chickens, how they tear each other apart because they're so crammed in together, and they chop off their beaks so they don't peck each other to death. And the cows and the pigs and all that is just such an horrendous experience that I remember once when I was first in Puerto Rico in 1976, this gentleman invited me to a cockfight here in Puerto Rico. And I didn't really want to go, but I thought, okay, number one, it's a cultural experience. Let me see what this is all about. And I made the mistake of going. And I
Make
tell
sure
you,
catch the
Babu,
bullfights in
I was
Mexico.
literally,
Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, I was literally, I was crying. I mean, because it was just, the atmosphere was just so surcharged with violence, you know. Even there was just two roosters fighting, still the nature of that is so profound, you know, especially if one is cultivating compassion, either consciously or unconsciously.
I think that's a good point. And also, people will say, they'll object and say, well, I don't need God consciousness. Just be kind. You know, that's all you have to do. You don't have to go to church and have all that rigmarole and brouhaha. Just be kind. But you nailed it. The point is, you have to rise above the modes of passion and ignorance. You can't do nothing and remain distant from the modes of passion and ignorance. The whole material world is permeated with the modes of passion and ignorance. Everybody that you rub shoulders with on the subway or the train, or that you go to work with, or that you go to school with, they go to the cafeteria and they eat flesh. The whole thing is passion and ignorance. You don't accidentally run into anyone in the mode of goodness. And so if you just leave it, if you're inactive, passive, you're going to be either too busy to care about it, which is the mode of passion, as you said, or you're going to be too overwhelmed by it to even consider it, by the mode of ignorance. So the point is that you need to have that foundation of devotion to God. Unless you see the Father, the common Father of all living beings, Sarva Yonishu Pantya Mortya Shambhava Tajma Brahma Mahadyara Aham Bija Pradapita, unless you see Krishna or God as the Father of all living beings, how can you possibly see others as your brothers and sisters? How could you possibly care about them on any meaningful level unless you see them as common offspring of our common Father? I remember listening to a tape where Yogi Bhajan, founder of Kundalini Yoga, you probably know a lot about them, having been in yoga studios multiple times, but he came to visit Prabhupada. Did you ever hear that tape? And he
Yes, I
invited him.
did.
He was organizing a conference on brotherhood in Texas, in Houston or something, and he offered to pay Prabhupada all of his expenses, his motel, if Prabhupada would just come. He was gathering all the religious leaders. We'll all get together. We'll all celebrate brothers and sisterhood, and it'll be a really good, feel-good thing. We'll set an example for the world. We'll inspire people. And Prabhupada said, why would I waste my time? He said, if you want to postulate, if you want to put in your posters and in your advertisement that we're all coming together under the mantle of Krishna consciousness, and we're going to focus on the Bhagavad Gita, and we're going to use this time of Sangha to increase our consciousness of God as the Supreme Father and acknowledge that across the board, then brotherhood doesn't even have to be separate or independently strive for. It comes automatically when you recognize aham bija pradapita, that God or Krishna, you may say God, why say Krishna? Because if you read the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is the most qualified. He meets and exceeds all of your preconceived notions about who God is. He'll blow your mind, in fact. When you compare the description of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, to very scanty descriptions of God, traces of descriptions of a God that we find about in other scriptures. So the fact of the matter is that without devotional service, without Krishna consciousness, you cannot just be kind. You might be kind to your family or your friends or those that look like you or those that live in your neighborhood or those that have your skin color or your species. But your so-called kindness is going to be self-serving. It's ultimately going to be selfish, and it's not going to extend to all living beings, not even close. You're going to be kind to one segment, and that segment is going to exploit and take more than its share away from other segments of living beings.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was remembering how even, one who is altruistic, they get gratification out of that, saying, I am a kind person. I am a good person. I am a charitable person. So that there's actually motivation behind that. We know that Bhakti is ahoitikiya pratihata, unmotivated, uninterrupted. So we do our service without any motivation. The motivation really is to please Krishna, not self-motivation, uninterrupted and not self-motivated. So we perform our devotional service to please Krishna, and all of the things that we do are to please Krishna. But the pitfall of one who is kind or quote unquote compassionate under the modes of material nature is there's some self-motivation. It makes me feel good about myself. And it's not free of self-motivation. It actually is what inspires them to go forth. Oh, I feel good about myself. Well, that's kind of contrary to what we feel good that Krishna is accepting our service, or we're trying to perform service to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And getting back to the Bhagavatam verse, it's watering the root of the tree. And then all living entities feel good.
It's like the kind of compassionate service to others you're talking about. It's like the little bud, and it gets a teaspoon of water. And it says, oh, that feels so good. I'm so fulfilled. I don't need anything more than this. But what it doesn't realize is that if you're just administering with an eyedropper a little drop of water on a single bud on the tree, or even 100 buds or 1,000 buds for that matter, the tree's going to die. So you may be saying, well, I'm fulfilled. I feel good about myself. But you don't realize that with a broader perspective, the tree on which you're situated is dying. And so whether you like it or not, you're going to be choked off. You're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to be happy. And that's why a lot of people who work in animal rights and who exhibit compassion to animals don't particularly like human beings. And it's why a lot of them it's not just because that you're working for animal rights that you're kind and jolly and good to be around with. I've met a lot of vegans, I've met a lot of animal rights people who are really unpleasant to be around, really angry, and really critical and really sour and really judgmental. So really, Prabhupada says here, the purifying process, not only should one aspire to be in the mode of goodness and to associate with people in the mode of goodness, but from the mode of goodness, one should link to devotees, not just be a vegetarian, but be a prasadarian. Not just take nonviolent food, but offer the food to Krishna first. Not just hang around people in the mode of goodness, but find people who are devotees, who are in fact transcendental to the mode of goodness. That's when real meaningful purification will take place. It begins from being liberated from the concept of different designations. This is what we talked about last week. If you designate yourself as a white, then you cannot help but have a bias towards other white people. If you designate yourself as a human being, then that designation in and of itself leaves out the whole animal kingdom. If you designate yourself as an animal rightist, that overlooks your fellow human beings. So you cannot help, as soon as there's a designation based on the body or the mind or the cause or the non-profit, automatically you lean towards one segment of living beings and you overlook or ignore or even exploit others. And therefore, Prabhupada says, the real purificatory process begins when you throw off all sarvapati vinirmuktam, purification, enlightenment, civilized human spiritual behavior cannot begin unless and until you throw off all designations. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a leftist. I'm not a rightist. I'm not for animals. I'm not for human beings per se. I'm not for white. I am Jivara Shurupahai Nitya Krishna Das. You have to start identifying yourself as an eternal servant of Krishna. And who is Krishna? The seed-giving Father, Aham Bija Pradapita, of all living beings. And his vision is that all souls are equally precious. All souls have an equal right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So unless until you give up all material designations and designate yourself as a servant of the Supreme Personality of God, the Father of living being, then any other designation will give you a material affinity, and you'll be materially attached, and based on that material attachment, you will be sectarian. You will favor one segment as opposed to another segment. And that's why it's said that of all causes, of all levels of knowledge, there is none which even comes close to doing devotional service amongst other devotees to the Supreme Personality of God. Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, 2nd verse. Prashant's on board now, so we're going to start getting our references. We also thank you, Divya Joshi, for jumping on. Subhadra is here. Ram Kishore has a friend who loves dogs. Oh, his comment just slipped below. Someone came on the top and his slipped below, but I'm pretty sure what he was saying was love dogs and eat pigs and cows. And reminds me of that bumper sticker. It says, why do you call some animals pets and others dinner? In any case, such schizophrenia, such conflicts do not arise in the lifestyle of the mind who are engaged in devotional service to the Lord. As it is explained here in the 2nd verse, 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Raja Vijay Rajagyam Povritamidam Uttamam Pachaksabhagaram Dharmam Susukam Kartamavyam. This knowledge of devotional service is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion, is everlasting and joyfully performed. And one of the reasons why this is the king of education is because those who engage in devotional service sincerely and seriously are friends. Nirvara sarvabhutashu yashamami dipandava. They have no enemies. They don't see in terms of friends, enemies, and neutral parties. They have given up all desires for self-centered, personal sense gratification. All they want to do as an atom at the lotus feet of the Lord, as Jivara Shurupahai Nitya Krishna Das, all they want to do as a Das, as a servant, is please the senses of the Lord. And I'll just give you one personal experience. And I may have mentioned this in the past. I was president of Berkeley Temple from 75 to 78. And I inherited the Chariot Festival in Golden Gate Park, which had been going on since 68 when Prabhupada inaugurated it. And so I was president. I organized the Chariot Festival in 75, 76, 77, 3 years. And, I do festivals. That's what I do. I do promotion. I do marketing. That's what I do. So each year, the festival built up. And on the last year that I organized the festival in 77, we had a front page article in the San Francisco Chronicle the Monday morning after the festival. And basically the headline said, 20,000 people brave blustery weather in Golden Gate Park to attend Krishna event. And in the article, the newspaper person wrote and repeatedly described the people as revelers. And I always remembered, why did they choose revelers? Because usually revelers is in connection with some bacchanalian orgy where there's naked women and liquor and just wantonness. I mean, that's, anytime I've ever heard the word, like Shakespeare, our revels are now past, and, all this like insubstantial has faded. So usually revelry and revelers are connected with gross sense gratification, mode of ignorance. And yet the author chose to describe the people at the festival as revelers. There was no drugs, there was no alcohol. We didn't even allow smoking on the property. But because Lord Jagannath was there, and we had puppetry, we had parade, we had bagpipes, we had Alice Coltrane, who was called Turiya Sanginitananda, with a band singing the string of prayers. We had Zakir Hussain, and none of it was for the crowd. Our aim was not to please the crowd per se. We were aiming to water the root of the tree and please Lord Jagannath, who was installed high on a dais on the stage there. That was our aim. But the point is that when Lord Jagannath is pleased, Jagat Nath means Jagat means universe, Nath means controller. When the controller of the universe is pleased, when the water is poured effectively and abundantly on the root of the tree, then all the branches, leaves, and flowers are automatically nourished. So everybody, without drugs, without sex, without alcohol, without cigarettes, just on the basis of chanting, and prasadam, and good association, everybody, the newspaper reporter registered them as revelers, which I thought was highly interesting and worth sharing, 45 years later?
That's good. I was also thinking that, this having a tendency or an inclination to kindness, we know that the modes of material nature, one predominates and then another takes over, et cetera, et cetera. They're constantly vying for control. And one who may have an inclination towards kindness, that doesn't necessarily mean they're in the mode of goodness. Because the mode of goodness, one of the symptoms of the mode of goodness is clarity of vision, clarity of perspective. And one of the symptoms of clarity of perspective is you see things as they are. You see that all living entity, all life is to be respected. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in Trinadapi Sunichena Torodapi Sahishnana Amanida Manadena Kirtanaya Siddhahari, that respect for all living entities is one of the four characteristics, he says, that you cultivate and you are able to chant repeatedly, constantly. So the thing about it is, unless you are actively cultivating a lifestyle of, could be sattvic lifestyle, but in terms of devotional service, it's a Shuddha sattvic lifestyle. That has the effect of giving one clarity of vision and being able to put together, to see the connection of all living entities, of all life. And the fact that we don't see means we don't have that perspective, which means, we may come in contact with the mode of goodness, and that may incite within your mind or your sentiments some mode of goodness behavior. But are you in the mode of goodness? No. And then the other thing is what Krishna tells Arjuna in the 11th chapter. You want to see my universal form, but you can't. You have to have divyam chakshush. As long as we have guna chakshush, we see according to the filters of the modes of material nature. But divyam chakshush only comes by the grace of Krishna. Krishna gives it to you. And the only way he'll give it to you is you have a heart like Arjuna, which is pure, a pure heart. And then Krishna will give you the ability to link it all together.
Those are amazing points. I mean, even if someone exhibits themselves to be in the mode of goodness, it's just incidental. It's accidentally. They haven't done anything to ensure that they're in the mode of goodness. It's just kind of wafted over them by circumstance. Otherwise, the next minute they can get in a group of people in the mode of ignorance, a group of people in the mode of passion. Sometimes I compare it, when you're at the mercy of the modes of material nature, it's like tag team wrestling. Like for a while you might be in the mode of goodness, but then the mode of passion tags you, and the mode of goodness goes out, and then you're slammed to the mat by the mode of passion, and then the mode of passion gets tagged by the mode of ignorance, and then you're drilled head down, onto the mat by the mode of ignorance, and then maybe the mode of goodness gets back in the ring for like 15 seconds before he's ejected. And the fact is, the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance are much stronger, isn't it, in this material world? And in the Kali Yuga, it's their time. Kali Yuga is not the time for the mode of goodness. You don't find, maybe in Satyagun, or Satya Yuga or Treta Yuga, but this is the time. This is the winter season. You don't find 85-degree temperature days, at least not in Utah. Maybe you do in Puerto Rico, but you don't find sunny, warm days in Utah in December, January, and February. So in the Kali Yuga age, you don't, you're even accidentally, you're not going to run across the mode of goodness. And even if you do a good deed, you're a good Samaritan for a half an hour, it's going to be replaced, eclipsed, trumped by the mode of passion, ignorance, which are everywhere present. And over, Lakshmi, this morning you've emphasized the fact that goodness, compassion, service to the higher entity is normal. It's the nature of the soul. Prabhupada says, as soon as one engages in the service of Vasudeva, who's in the hearts of all living beings, he attains his normal constitutional position. And here's a good example, Prashant. Prashant, this is the 14th verse, 5th chapter, 7th canto of the Bhagavatam. Yatha brahmyati ayo brahman, shrayam akarsha sinidho, tata me vidyate chetas, chakur pranir yadvichaya. This is how natural devotional service. You don't have to try separately for goodness. You don't have to try separately for sensitivity. You don't have to try separately for empathy. It's all comes to you automatically as a result of devotional service to the Lord. And here's the example that Prabhupada gives, or Narada Muni. As iron attracted by a magnetic stone moves automatically, note the use of the word automatically, toward the magnet, my consciousness, having been changed by his will, is naturally, notice these words, automatically, naturally attracted by Lord Vishnu, who carries a disc in his hand. Thus I have no independence. What does it mean by concluding this verse saying I have no independence? It means I'm not going to misuse my free will to terrorize and victimize all of the living beings. Prashant very nicely gave us the quote earlier from, I believe it's the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Mat karma kreen mat paramo. Mat karma kreen mat paramo. I'm no longer out for myself. I'm no longer thinking of number one when I engage in devotional service. Just the opposite. Mat paramo. I'm thinking of the Supreme Lord of all creatures. Like the sun in the sky who shines and benedicts and blesses all people equally. Mad karma kreen mad sangha varjita. I'm no longer sangha. I'm no longer at the mercy. I'm no longer associating with the modes of passion, the modes of ignorance, the mode of goodness. I am protected, immunized by devotional service. Mam chavabharani sagunam samati chaitam brahma bhuya kalpateng. Engaged in the lotus feet of the service of the Lord, one becomes protected from the influence of the modes of material nature. Mad karma creed mad paramo mad bhaktasa nirvara shavabhutashu yasa mamitipa. Consequently, one exhibits all good qualities. One is a friend to all living beings. No living being need fear other living being. And just as a kind of a reflection of that, we have lots of animals here on our property in Spanish Fork. We have llamas, we have peacocks. Sometimes they just drop in, they just know that this is a special place. So we often get chickens, who kind of take shelter here. They kind of arrive on the property and you can tell they're, thank God I made it. Thank God I made it, thank God, I got away from there, I remember a cartoon I saw a number of years ago. I think it was in the New Yorker magazine. It was two cows, obviously a male bull and a female. And the male was right up at the fence, looking over the fence, kind of like the grass is green on the other side type thing. and the female was kind of behind him over his left shoulder. And he had a little quote, a little bubble that said, "Gloria, somewhere out there, there's a land where cows are cows and men are men and they live happily together. And it's called India, and we're going there."
Oh, that's funny.
What if you don't have any other takeaway from today's session? It's natural. It's the natural function of the soul, just like an iron filing doesn't have to think, should I go toward the magnet or not? It has no independence to go away from the magnet. The magnet is bigger, it's stronger. It's like gravity. You choose to fall? Do you choose to go down? It's because the earth is a bigger entity. It gives us shelter, it gives us food, it gives us housing, it gives us association. So it's good. It's the best thing in the world that the earth pulls us to it, that we're attached to the earth, that we don't just go floating off into outer space where there's no air, where there's no association, where there's no food. So the fact that there's the pull of gravity is the best thing. So the devotee says, I have no independence. And when you hear that and you're a liberal, free-thinking, humanitarian, you think, well, that's not good. I don't want to give up my independence. But it's you're giving up your independence to be adrift, to be starving spiritually, mentally, emotionally. You're giving up your freedom to be connected to God and to see all other living beings as part of the same family. And the thing is, the kind of dependence which is glorified here is that you cannot leave the presence of the Lord even for a moment. The Lord is beauty, the Lord is knowledge, the Lord is compassion, the Lord is power, the Lord is humility. Every desirable quality rests, has its abode in the Lord. He's called Gunatmana, the source of all valuable qualities. So devotional service means go right to the source. Grab with all the strength you can muster to the lotus feet of the Lord. And as a result, devotional service will become so natural. Life becomes so blissful. And one doesn't have to try separately or independently for any of these good qualities.
Just like you probably know this verse, I don't remember the Sanskrit, but just as the Ganges flows to the ocean, so let my heart flow to the lotus feet of the Lord. So that's, like you said, that's natural. The rivers are flowing to the ocean. You don't have to direct them. You don't have to dynamite them. You don't have to do anything. They're just naturally flowing. That's the first thing. The other thing I wanted to say was, what are we made of? Where do our inclinations come from? Our inclinations come from samskaras. And if we cultivate over the course of many, many births, rajasic or tamasic samskaras, it's gonna give us inclinations in that regard. Even the sattvic samskaras that we cultivate, it's going to give us those kinds of inclinations. And that's why the process of bhakti is geared at allowing us to make the impression where we have first and foremost the Supreme Lord. That is what sadhana is all about. Patanjali describes sadhana as something that you perform repeatedly over a long period of time. And we know from the bhakti perspective, the bhakti sadhana is we do it repeatedly. Every morning we rise, we chant our rounds, we see and worship the form of the Lord. We take prasadam that's offered to the Lord. That is our life. And we are cultivating samskaras. Henry David Thoreau says that you do not make a path by walking a field once. That does not make a path. You have to walk that repeatedly before it becomes a path. So the samskaras that we are cultivating are simultaneous. It creates a path, and it's also purifying. It's purifying us from our conditioned state.
It comes right back to that basic axiomatic truth. Cheto darpana marjanam baba devagni saya kaya ravichandika vidyavadu jivanan anandam buddhivardhanam pratiparam purnamritashvaram sarvatma shnapanam param vidayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. The heart is like a mirror, and it reflects whatever it is that we associate with. So we've been associating with the modes of passion, the modes of ignorance, occasionally the mode of goodness, since time immemorial, so many countless different incarnations. And what you call samskara is the impressions, It says a snake. If you kill a snake, what the snake does at the time of death, it takes a picture. It takes a picture of its killer. So when the mate comes by later, it is said the mate looks in the eyes of their dead mate, and there's a picture there of the person that killed him. And ever after that, the mate looks for that person so they can bite him. So that's what we're talking about. When you say samskara, we're talking about something that really is deep rooted. We say, well, I forgot that. The sad fact is that you didn't forget anything. Whatever the impressions that you've had through thousands and thousands of priests, you carry them with you. They're still with you. And you cannot get rid of them just by a one-on-one process of nullifying or negation or atonement. If you have a really nasty impression that you're carrying around with you that causes you to act against your best interests over and over and over again, and then it kind of snowballs and you get more and more entangled in the reactions of your sinful activities, you cannot eradicate those strong impressions which have been with you and which have multiplied and snowballed and compounded by any process other than the process of chanting the Lord's holy names in pure devotional service. There is Tate Vishnu Namaha Sujanti Tajmai Prabhavishnave Namaha. The only process powerful enough to eradicate all these dirty things within the heart and clean the mirror is chanting the holy names of the Lord. And you can't just do it once. You have to do it daily and repeatedly. And even after all those impressions have been cleared out, even great liberated souls continue chanting so that no new impressions come, and so that they set a good example for people on the devotional path, that others may look at their example and purify themselves and achieve freedom from the modes of material nature, from all the miseries of this material world, by pursuing the footsteps that the previous practitioners have trod. Good thoughts. I hope that you're all uplifted and inspired. I feel really good. Rupa Manjari, Prashant there with all the quotes, Bipin. There's a lot more to be said on this, and how blissful it is to talk about devotional service and the natural attractiveness of the Lord and how everything flows without meditation. This is where we'd all like to be on one level. We're just unaware of the actual purificatory, streamlined, powerful process to get us to where we need to go. And so we're glad that you've joined us. We're glad that you've been willing to take your time and open up your ears to the advantages of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the last word in spiritual practices. And we'll be back Monday after Gaur Purnima, the appearance day celebrations of Lord Chaitanya. On Sunday, we'll be back Monday with more meditations and examples of the naturalness of devotional service to the Lord. And if you don't believe that it's natural, just listen to this wonderful kirtan of Lakshmi and see if you don't just kind of fall right into the flow of it.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Haribo, Hare Krishna.
What's more natural than kirtan? Even the atheist, humanitarian, the agnostic, who could be so hard-hearted as not to enjoy kirtan, glorification of the common source of all of us, whether you believe there is a God or there's no God, or whether he's an impersonal God. What could possibly be the objection to sitting down with others and enjoying kirtan, especially one so beautifully, adroitly performed as your own? Thank you so much. Rob, do you have any choice words for us this morning? Are you there?
I am here, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Uh,
This was an excellent class again, as usual. A lot of great information in there. Something that got me thinking was the fact that all life is to be respected, that all spirit beings are equal in the eyes of Krishna. And living in this Western country, it seems like we've been completely brainwashed to disassociate the meat that we eat from the animals it comes from. It's like they have gone out of their way to keep us from thinking that this meat that we consume came from a cow or a pig or a chicken or a turkey. And it's like the epitome of Kali Yuga. Like almost everything, in my opinion, about this country encourages the mentality of Kali Yuga and the modes of passion and ignorance. And so the disassociation makes it very difficult for people to see that there's a spirit being that these foodstuffs came from. And I've always been very connected with nature. Like I catch the spiders and insects in the house and let them outside. I spent half an hour picking worms off the sidewalk the other day and throwing them back in the grass. But yet I still ate meat for so long. And I think a lot of it is because of that disassociation. When you're eating that food, you're not thinking this used to be living. This used to be a creature that was sacred to Krishna and God. So it's a hurdle that we have to overcome. We have to be very conscientious and aware that what we're eating is important, and where it comes from is important, and the way that it's grown or raised is important. And it's nice to see a lot of the mentality of the people is finally shifting more towards that, to be more aware of what they're eating. And it just reinforces in my mind, the need to have healthy, wholesome food that is comes from good sources. We can't continue down the road that we've been on if we expect to reach a higher level.
I remember about a year ago, a rooster just appeared on our property. Oftentimes animals just show up. It's like they're running away from unthinkable fate, on the farmyard. So this rooster showed up one day, and we were sitting, it was summer, and I was sitting in a lounge chair on the back porch of the ashram. And the rooster came up, and he just stood there at my feet where I was sitting, and he looked up at me with such uncertainty and such trembling. And I knew he wanted me to pick him up. And so I reached my arm down, and just like he stepped up on my arm, and I put him up, and I was kind of leaning back at like a 45-degree angle. And he just sat down on my chest, and he was just trembling like a leaf. He was so shaken by whatever it was that he was escaping from. And he just needed to be comforted and reassured that he wasn't going to be disrespected, overlooked, denied, that he was going to be protected. And that's all he really wanted. I mean, he just wanted to live his life, that's all, and not just be seen as a meal by some, I don't even want to say the word, and so it was a very meaningful moment to me, that all he wanted was shelter, all he wanted was protection. And what does it cost us? We just throw a few seeds on the ground every day. They don't hardly eat anything. And he was so grateful. He would often come up and he'd want a reassuring pat or to pick him up. And that's, the animals don't ask for much. They just ask that you not terrorize them. You know, it's like, I'm your brother, you know, just don't kill me. Just don't eat me. Just don't eat your brother. That's all they're asking for. So good points, Rob. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you all for listening in. We have 34 comments, and that's a good number. And we've had likes from Nate Benson and Patrick from Reno. Patrick and Mary, my two favorite people in Reno. Sanjay, Haribo Sanjay. Ravi Karan Parmore, Shuka and Ravi, thank you so much. Cash and carry grocery stores. Wonderful people. Prashant, our pundit, our sage, who has left behind the connections to so many of our quotes. Sundari Priya, thank you so much. Sundari Priya and I have 360 mutual friends. And Rasangi and I have 286 mutual friends. Anu, thank you. This is like the 5th or 6th day in a row. Anu's been with us. She even joins the Sanghas at 11 o'clock Monday morning. Manohar Das, thanks for joining us. Divya Joshi, pranams, Divya. Ram Kishore, we value you, Ram, and all your insightful comments. Yesterday, Ram, he knows someone who knows the Pope, who is a vegetarian, which we didn't know. Radmila from Croatia. Advaita and Kalindi are away for a month, and so we're trying to pull together and cover some of their cooking and artis. And so after this class on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for the next month, I'm going to have to run into the kitchen. And so I may not be able to respond to your comments right away, but let me encourage you to comment, to like, to share as much as possible. And I will get back to you, just maybe later in the day, because I have to cook because the buffet opens at 11 o'clock. And I'm just covering shifts that others have vacated for a month's time. William, shout out to Los Angeles, William and Ali. Bhakti Gary sent me a transcript of one of these sessions, and he had great time and trouble, typed out, wonderful job. It's called The Mysterious Lord. Subhadra, thank you, Subhadra, for your consistency and regularity. Star, Hari Hari Bol, Star Kecho. Rakesh, one of our favorite, most sweet devotees here in the Salt Lake congregation. Raleigh, Haribo Raleigh, thank you so much for joining us. Rupa Manjari and Jean. That's everybody. I'm going to type our Patreon address. Check it out. You'll find it interesting. There are various levels. If you're not already a member, for as little as $3 a month, you can get a Back to Godhead subscription. There's got Srimad Bhagavatam sets, Bhagavad Gitas, if you don't already have them. Even a week's free vacation at Spanish Fork, Utah is one of the things that are on offer on our Patreon page. So I'll put the link to that afterwards. So it's been wonderful. I look forward to being with you throughout the weekend when we celebrate the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, our Savior and Messiah. And we'll be back on a week from, or 5 days from now with Motivational Monday. Keep safe, be happy and blissful Krishna consciousness, and always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama
Ram,
Hare Hare.